Welcome to Off-Leash Canine Training. My name is Nick White, and I'm doing this video to help guide you through important tips, tricks, and reminders that's going to help maximize you and your dog's training with us. Whether you're doing private lessons, our 1-week board and train, or our 2-week board and train, this video is for you to reference in the future and all of your training going forward, just in case something is forgotten or you're not sure about something. This video is designed to be a reference for you and your dog's training. Now we're going to jump into some basic characteristics about your off-leash canine training e-collar. You probably received one of these two e-collars. This one is the Off-Leash Canine 300, this one is the Off-Leash Canine 1200. Really, their functions and everything's pretty much the same, so whatever information goes for one generally goes for the other. Some of the main differences of these two is the range. This has about a half a mile range. This larger 1200 has a little over a 3/4 of a mile range. So as I like to joke, if your dog's more than 3/4 of a mile away from you or half a mile away from you, you probably have more issues with your training than the e-collar range itself. One thing to keep in mind is those range distances are based off line of sight. Maybe you're in an open field or something like that. So if there's a lot of obstructions, a lot of buildings, that e-collar range is greatly reduced, so that is something to keep in mind. One of the next things I like to cover is your e-collar, the controller, and the e-collar itself on your dog. Both of those are 100% waterproof. So your dog can swim with it on, you can be in the water, the ocean, the pool, with the remote in your hand, your dog can be in there with the e-collar receiver on his neck, and all of that works perfectly fine. You can also use the e-collar stimulation just like you're being taught by your trainer while your dog is in the water and while you're in the water. Again, it's 100% waterproof. The one thing we do tell people to keep in mind is if you're going to be in the ocean, salt water destroys a lot of things. So keep in mind when you get out of the ocean, you want to rinse both of those off with fresh, clean water to keep the e-collar from getting degraded based off the salt. The next thing I like to point out is the charging port. There's a charging port on the back, and there's a charging port on the back of the e-collar receiver as well. You have a charger that has two ends. You simply plug both of those in and you're all set. You're generally going to charge these every night. I tell everyone, treat your e-collars like a cell phone. When you go to bed at night, you should take the collar off of your dog, never leave it on overnight, and you should plug both of them in. And now when you wake up in the morning, you start with a fresh e-collar, fully charged up, and again, no matter how much you're utilizing it, you're not going to go through an entire e-collar battery and drain the battery in a single day. So just charge it every night, and again, if you stick to that policy, then you also stick to our other rule, which is always take the e-collar off your dog at night. Never leave it on if they're home alone, never leave it on overnight. The reason that that's important is if you leave that e-collar on overnight or prolonged periods of time, let's say consistently more than 10 hours a day, those prongs on the e-collar, especially if your e-collar is loose, which we'll get into in a second, will rub back and forth on your dog's neck. And what will happen is it'll kind of rub your dog's neck raw, making it look really nasty and ugly. Some people that aren't sure, don't know any better, assume the e-collar stimulation did that to their dog, but that's incorrect. What happened is they left the e-collar on overnight, they left it on for prolonged periods of time, 12, 14, 16 hours consistently, and it was probably too loose. Those prongs consistently rubbed back and forth on their dog's neck, causing their neck to get really nasty and raw. Then you got to take them to the vet, get ointment to put on it, and all of that can be avoided if you stick to two simple rules. Take it off at night, and never leave it on for more than 8 to 10 hours in a day. So hopefully that all makes sense. The next thing we're going to cover is the back of the collar itself. You're going to see two buttons on the back in addition to the charging port that we just pointed out. The first button you're going to see is the on and off button. This is how you turn on and off your e-collar. So if I hold that button down for 2 to 3 seconds, just like that, the e-collar turns on. I hold that button on the back for 2 to 3 seconds, and just like that, the e-collar turns off. It should go without saying, however, we still always point it out. Ensure the e-collar receiver and remote are both turned on before you start training with your dog, before you take them outside and do all the things that you're learning from us. The next button you're going to see next to that, if you look really close, has an inscribed M and C into it. That's the two types of stimulation these e-collars have. That's momentary and continuous. A momentary nick or a continuous stimulation. Now, depending on what your trainer told you for your dog specifically, that's the type of stimulation that you want to use. So if your trainer told you, you're going to be on C stimulation, then when you look at your remote, you should see a little C on the remote. So if your trainer told you that you should be on C stimulation, but you see an M, you need to hold that button down back there for same 2 to 3 seconds and cycle through it until just an M appears on the screen. So it'll go M and C, hold it again, it'll go just M, hold it again, back to just C. So again, you really never need to change this. There's no reason to change this. It's just important to know in case maybe this was in your pocket, somehow it got changed, and you notice that the dial says M, but your trainer told you C, or vice versa, hold that down for 2 to 3 seconds and cycle through the different settings until you get to the mode that your trainer told you was right for your dog. The next thing we're going to be covering is the T mode, the T button. We really don't use this for training whatsoever. That's the button on the side of your remote marked T. This stands for test. So this can be configured where when you press it, it lets out a tone or it'll vibrate the e-collar on your dog. Again, we really don't use it for anything training related. However, what we do use it for is kind of a built-in safety mechanism for you to ensure that you've done everything right. So when you wake up in the morning, you're going to pull your e-collar and your e-collar receiver off of the charger. You're going to turn on the e-collar, which we're going to go into shortly. Then you're going to turn on the remote. And what we do is we press that test button just to make sure we hear the beep or feel the vibration in the e-collar. That lets you know you've done everything properly, and it lets you know that they're communicating with each other. At this point, you can go ahead and proceed and put the e-collar on your dog. So now that you have your e-collar on, you're going to grab your e-collar receiver. You're going to see a red dot on the remote and then a red indentation on the receiver itself. All you do is touch the female to the male, and you will see that turn on the e-collar receiver. To turn it off, you're taking it off. Maybe you're running to the store, you're going to take it off and charge it at night. You turn it off, you go ahead and touch those together again just like that, and that shuts off the e-collar receiver. So as I pointed out earlier, we're going to turn it on, and maybe you're getting ready to put this on the dog, but you want to make sure you've done everything correctly. So that looks on, this looks on, but just as a built-in safety mechanism, I'm going to press the test button. And if you can notice, it's vibrating, so it's in vibration mode. And that just reassures me that everything's working properly, these two are communicating, and now I can proceed and put the e-collar onto my dog. So to go back to the remote itself, we've covered everything on the back, we've covered the test button. Now we're going to get into the dial and the black stimulation button and the red stimulation button. I like to point out to everyone, these two, the stim dial and the black S, these are kind of your most important buttons on your e-collar that you're going to be utilizing the most. So whether you're right-handed or left-handed, I like to tell people the best way to hold the e-collar is face down in your right hand. And that way you can use it like this. Because you're going to learn shortly, as I'm sure your trainer told you, the number on the remote really isn't important because everything's based off the communication with your dog and your dog's reaction to that stimulation. So the first thing we're going to point out is the black S. What this is what's delivering the stimulation to the dog. So if I turn the dial and press the S, that is delivering the stimulation to the e-collar receiver, just like that. The red button, this is your continuous button, and we really don't use this really in training for much. It can also be programmed, if you read in your guide, to be an emergency boost and things like that. However, really the most things you're going to be using is your stimulation dial, your black S, your test to make sure you're doing everything correctly, and your on and off button, and of course, charging it every night. So how all this works, you're going to be at a 0. As I like to tell people, there's three main components that you really kind of have to learn to master to be on the same page with your dog. The first component is you always press the black S at the same time as you give the command. Timing is very important. So this is how it would look. I would go, Max, come, just like that, same exact time. The stimulation with the commands are together. Notice I do not go, come, and then press it. Or, come, they're simultaneously linked. Come, just like that. Say your dog, Max, doesn't respond. You'll just do a small increase in stimulation and you will repeat that. Come, no response, small increase, come, small increase, come, small increase, come. Max now complies and comes. You drop your remote back to 0, and now you're prepared for the next command utilizing the same exact strategy. Sit, sit, sit. Max sits, back to 0, repeat. So that's how it's working, is the e-collar learning curve for your dog should be a gradual increase in stimulation. It should not be a high increase where you're going from like a 0 to a 30 on the remote. Just a small gradual increase in stimulation as there's non-compliance with the command. You're pressing the button at the same exact time. And then the third thing is the pace in which you do that. So where a lot of owners go wrong is they give the dog too much delay in between commands. Maybe Max is out playing. Say you've went through our board and train, he's already off leash, you're loving life, Max is loving life, you have him at the park, he's running around and you want to recall him. And this is how a lot of owners will do it. They will go, Max, come. They're looking, maybe, is he coming? No, he's still looking, he's still sniffing the grass. All right, turn it up a little, come. They wait a few seconds, see if he's going to respond, turn it up a little, and they repeat that way. The third and important tip is the speed at which the first two take place. The first important thing, button with the command. The second important tip is small increase in stimulation. And then the third and final tip is the speed at which that takes place. So kind of perfect timing should look like this. Come, Max doesn't make an effort, increase. Come. No effort, increase. Come. No effort, increase. Come. Max comes running, back to your 0, and you're ready for the next command. So it should be very come, come, come. There's not a big delay in there. As I like to teach owners, the way I teach all my owners when I travel is in your head, a perfect cadence for e-collar stimulation should be come, up a little, come, up a little. Come, up a little, come, up a little. So if you find yourself going, come, obviously you're off with the cadence, you're off with the timing, and your dog's training results are going to mirror that mismatched timing and mismatched cadence. So it's very important that you become a master of those three. Button at the same time as the command, small increase in pressure, and the cadence and timing for which those first two take place. Now, the next thing we're going to cover is the e-collar receiver itself. If you have the 1200 model, instead of having this red dot, you're going to have a button on the inside of here which turns on and off the e-collar. You just press it, it'll turn the collar on. You press it again, it'll turn the collar off. And the 300 model, obviously you have the red dot. But everything else I just told you is exactly the same and all the same rules, concepts apply. Now, you're ready to put the e-collar on your dog. There's a couple important things that's very, very important. Notice the e-collar has this D-ring built in. Never put a leash on the e-collar itself. You should always have two collars on. You should have the e-collar on and then another. We use a tight biothane style collar, a collar that can't pop over your dog's head and now your dog take off running or something like that. So never put it on here. The reason that's important is if I put the leash on the collar here and maybe Max pulls really hard, what happens is it pulls those prongs into his neck, and obviously you don't want that. So you'll always put the leash on a separate collar, not on the e-collar. The next thing I like to point out is proper placement of the e-collar receiver on your dog's neck. This is one of the things that most people have an issue with. Many people, when they show up for our lessons or refresher trainings, the e-collar is on their dog's neck way too loose. Remember, this does not fit like a standard collar that your dog's used to wearing or that you're used to putting on your dog. When the collar is on your dog properly, it should be a tight 2 fingers from the back of their neck to the collar. So how we check it is we come up behind the dog and we put our fingers in right on the back of their neck, and it should be a snug 2 fingers. That's one of the biggest issues that we encounter when dealing with trainers, handlers, just really anyone when it comes to e-collars, is the fitting of the e-collar is not tight enough or it's not in a good place. So make sure you have a nice tight 2 fingers. A good way is if this e-collar is on your dog's neck, you shouldn't be able to slide it back and forth. So if you put it on here, you shouldn't be able to just slide it over when it's on its neck. It should kind of stick because it's nice and snug on there. So that's one of the errors many people make. Or maybe you know you put the e-collar on right here, but 30 minutes later it's on the back of his neck or somewhere over here. Obviously you know that it's too loose because it generally shouldn't move from where you initially placed it. So tight 2 fingers, and then the placement of your e-collar, it can go from the sides of your dog's neck down. And again, every dog's different. I've learned this with various breeds of dogs, different sizes. There's really no exact place to put an e-collar. As I say, it's very dog dependent. So maybe you want to experiment with your dog and see where you're getting the best reaction. Sometimes it can be high up on the neck over here. Maybe you do that and he's not feeling much, so you'll put it over here, you'll move it around. But as long as it's from the sides of the neck down, tight 2 fingers, and the leash is attached to another collar, not the e-collar, you're starting to be set up in a good position to start your training with your dog. Now we're going to discuss some little bonus features that's built into your e-collar. Again, this applies to both the 300 and the 1200, and both features work exactly the same regardless of which system you have. The first thing I'm going to point out is the light feature. If you remember, I talked on the back of the remote about this big button that says on off above it. Remember, if you hold that for 3 seconds, that will turn your remote off. If you hold that for 3 seconds, that will turn your remote back on. But many of you have noticed under the on and off button, it says light as well. This is a really cool feature that's very good to utilize. Maybe you're on a long walk with your dog in the evening, you live off of a side street, a busy road, or maybe you're letting your dog enjoy his newfound freedom and it's dark out, you have a big yard, maybe you're at a park, and you just always want to be able to be aware of where your dog is. That's where the light feature comes in. So if your remote is on and your e-collar receiver is on, versus holding this down for the 2 to 3 seconds to turn the remote on and off, if you just tap it quickly, it starts a strobe light on the e-collar, and at nighttime it's very, very bright. But if you tap it once more, it becomes a solid light. So now your dog kind of has a mounted flashlight to them, and you can see them running around everywhere they go. And if you tap it once more, it shuts the light off. So again, as a recap, if you hold it for 2 to 3 seconds, the remote shuts off. Hold it for 2 to 3 seconds, the remote turns on. One quick tap, light strobe. Another quick tap, light solid. Another quick tap, the light shuts off. Very useful. The next thing, we really don't utilize this for anything in our training. However, a lot of owners do this on accident once they get home, and then they think their e-collar is broken, so they call in and email us, and generally what they say is, I think I need a new remote, my remote's stuck on the number 17, or my remote is stuck on the number 23, or it's just stuck on a random number, and no matter what I do, I've turned it on, I've turned it off, I turned the dial, it will not come off that number. It's a very simple fix. This is a built-in feature of the e-collar called the lock and set. Again, we really don't use this for training, but it's important for you to know in case you encounter this, you know how to fix it. So all that happened is I turned this to a level 10. Now if I hold this down, the stem dial, for about 2 to 3 seconds, it'll lock that 10 into place. And just like that, now it just says 10. If I turn it on, turn it off, it'll just stay locked into a 10. To fix that, it's very simple. Just hold, depress downward again for 2 to 3 seconds. And just like that, you will see it has now unlocked your remote. In closing, I would like to remind you that training dogs is just like training for people. It's an ongoing process and there's never perfection. You can always get better. So your job going forward is to make your dog better, more confident. And you do those by doing what's called the 3 Ds. That's increasing duration, increasing distance, and increasing distractions. So that's kind of an ongoing path that you're going to continue to do with your dog for the life of your dog. Again, just like people, it's ongoing training to get better and better. If at any point you face some challenges or roadblocks, maybe it's with dogs or certain triggers for your dog, then what you do is you just back off a little bit, go back to where your dog was having success, and then slowly build upon that until you get past those roadblocks again. Again, that's duration, distance, and distractions, or the 3 Ds to make your dog better at obedience, more confident, more reliable, and all the great things that you see going on in our training videos. So from all of us at Off Leash Canine Training, we want to thank you for your business. And if at any time you have any questions about your dog, training, our e-collars, feel free to reach out to the trainer in your area and we are more than happy to assist you.